The training hall at Westgate Military Sniper Academy buzzed with the usual pre-class energy. Recruits clustered in groups, swapping war stories and comparing their impressive military backgrounds, medal counts, unit citations, combat deployments. That read like action movie scripts. In the back row, almost invisible among the towering figures in olive drab, sat Emma Torres, 26 years old, with long brown hair always tied back in a practical knot. She possessed a small frame that seemed almost fragile compared to the other cadets. Her file was practically empty. No distinguished units, no commendations, no impressive combat record to wave around like a flag. From day one, Emma had blended into the background while others loudly proclaimed their achievements. She kept her head down, spoke only when spoken to, and maintained a kind of invisibility that made people forget she was even there. During the first physical training session, a massive recruit named Bradley Davidson had decided to make his mark. Sweat dripping from his buzzed head, he called out across the training yard, "Hey, little mouse, maybe you should consider nursing school instead of handling real weapons." Emma simply smiled, said nothing, and kept doing her push-ups with perfect form. The other cadets snickered. Someone muttered about diversity quotas. Another suggested she would wash out within a week. In theoretical classes about wind calculation and gravitational drift, Emma always sat alone in the back row. She never took notes, just observed with those quiet brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything. During a group exercise measuring crosswinds, the entire squad struggled with their calculations. Numbers did not add up. Trajectories looked wrong. Emma spoke softly from her corner. "Adjust back 7 degrees, aim 4 centimeters lower." Nobody listened. The exercise continued with incorrect data. Result? The entire team missed their target by exactly 3 centimeters. The instructor, Carl Hayes, reviewed the failed exercise with obvious frustration. "Someone had the right answer," he announced, scanning the frustrated faces. But apparently, nobody thought it was worth listening to. A few cadets glanced at Emma. She was already packing her equipment, expression unreadable. That evening, in the mess hall, Davidson cornered her again. "Think you are some kind of genius, Torres?" "No," Emma replied, cutting her food with surgical precision. "I just pay attention to details that matter." "Details?" Davidson laughed. "Like what, your nail polish?" Emma looked up for the first time, meeting his gaze directly. "Like the fact that you consistently pull left when you are angry. Your breathing changes. Your dominant eye shifts. You will never hit anything important until you learn to control your emotions." The table went silent. Davidson's face reddened, but he could not argue. His shooting scores were public knowledge, and everyone knew about his accuracy problems under pressure. Week after week, the pattern continued. Emma performed adequately in all exercises. Never spectacular, never terrible, just consistently competent. While others struggled or showed off, she quietly helped struggling cadets, shared her lunch with those who forgot theirs, never asked for credit or recognition. During weapons maintenance, while others complained about cleaning duties, Emma worked with the focus of someone who understood that a dirty rifle meant dead soldiers. Her movements were economical, precise. There was something almost ritualistic about how she handled each component. In her small canvas pencil case, she kept a single bullet, hand engraved with tiny markings. Plus 12.4 W, final win confirmed. Nobody ever asked about it. Nobody ever noticed the way she sometimes rolled it between her fingers during difficult lectures, like a prayer bead or a talisman. The other cadets saw weakness, saw someone who did not belong. They had no idea they were sitting next to a ghost. That engraved bullet in Emma's pencil case represented the most important shot she never got credit for. The markings indicated wind compensation data that only someone who took that exact shot would know. But Emma Torres had learned long ago that some victories are meant to remain invisible. Some heroes are not supposed to exist in official records. And sometimes, the most important work happens in complete silence. As she lay in her narrow bunk that night, listening to Davidson and his crew trade loud stories about their battlefield exploits, Emma fingered that engraved bullet and remembered a day when everything had gone wrong, when 12 lives hung in the balance, and when a 20-year-old girl with a makeshift wind gauge had to make 3 impossible shots. Nobody in this academy knew that story. Nobody ever would, if she had her way. But watching these young soldiers struggle with basic concepts that could one day save their lives, Emma began to wonder if staying invisible was really the right choice anymore. 3 weeks into training, Colonel Hayes dimmed the lights in the Advanced Ballistics Theory classroom. Today, we are analyzing the most technically challenging sniper shot in recent military history. The screen flickered to life, displaying grainy surveillance footage from a desert border conflict. Heat shimmer distorted the air. A single figure, barely visible through a high-powered scope, took position on rocky, unstable ground. Target distance, 2.7 kilometers. Moving target, severe crosswind conditions. 1 shot, 1 kill. Mission success. The video showed what seemed impossible. A bullet traveling through swirling desert air, compensating for wind that would have defeated most professional snipers. The target dropped instantly, and the mission was completed. The hall erupted in appreciation. Cadets whistled and applauded like they were watching an action movie. Has to be SEAL Team 6. Someone shouted. Delta Force, definitely, another voice added. Whoever took this shot is an absolute legend. Davidson, still nursing his wounded pride from previous encounters with Emma, turned around in his seat. Hey, Torres, think you could make a shot like that? More laughter. More pointing. The spotlight of mockery focusing on the quiet girl who never fought back. Emma did not look up from her notebook. When she spoke, her voice was so soft that only the front rows could hear her. I took that shot. The laughter grew louder. Someone actually slapped their knee. Davidson pressed his advantage, enjoying the audience. You, with those little arms? You probably could not even lift that rifle. When was this filmed anyway? You would have been what? In high school? Playing with makeup instead of military weapons? But Emma was already moving. She stood up, walked to the front of the classroom, and picked up a marker. Numbers began flowing from her hand with mathematical precision onto the whiteboard. Wind angle, 12.4 degrees northwest. Rotational drift compensation, plus 2.7 mils. Gravitational drop calculation, minus 15.3 inches. Every figure matched the classified ballistics report from that desert operation. Information that was never made public. Data that only the shooter would know. The room fell silent. These were not lucky guesses. This was insider knowledge. Captain Marcus Webb, who had been quietly grading papers in the corner, suddenly stood up. Webb had served as forward observer during that exact border operation. He knew details that were not in any official report. Show me your hands, Webb commanded, walking toward Emma. She extended both hands without hesitation. Webb examined them, like a detective studying evidence. Her left index finger was heavily calloused in a specific pattern. The webbing between her thumb and forefinger on her right hand showed permanent indentation scars that only came from hundreds of hours. Gripping a Barrett anti-material rifle, Webb's face went pale. Jesus Christ, you are Ghost 11. The designation hit the room like a thunderclap. Ghost 11 was a legend, a mythical figure, the sniper who appeared in impossible situations and vanished without a trace. That's impossible, Davidson stammered. Ghost 11 is ... is what? Is what? Webb asked quietly. Male? Bigger? Older? More intimidating? Emma remained standing at the whiteboard, marker still in her hand. She looked smaller than ever, but something had changed in her posture. The invisibility was lifting. The wind that day, she said, addressing the room for the first time with her full voice. It was not just crosswind. There was thermal updraft from the rocks, rotational current from the canyon walls, and a pressure front moving in from the east. She drew a quick diagram showing air currents that would have been invisible to anyone who was not there. Standard ballistics calculations would have missed by 8 feet. The target would have lived. 12 soldiers would have died in the ambush. Webb nodded grimly. The ambush we did not know was coming until that shot broke it up. How did you account for all those variables? Emma smiled for the first time in weeks. I used a shoelace. She pulled up her left sleeve, revealing a thin red cord, wrapped 3 times around her wrist. When all your electronic wind measurement equipment gets destroyed, you improvise. This little piece of string saved more lives than any computer ever did. The class stared at her with new eyes. This was not the mouse in the corner anymore. This was someone who had performed miracles under impossible conditions. The days following Emma's revelation were a strange mix of respect and suspicion. Word spread quietly through the academy, not officially, not in reports or briefings. But soldiers talk, and some stories are too important to ignore. Davidson, however, was not ready to let go of his position as the academy's unofficial alpha. If anything, Emma's impossible credentials made him more determined to prove she did not belong. During a particularly challenging long-range exercise, he made his move. You know what I think? He announced loudly enough for half the shooting line to hear. I think Torres here has been telling tall tales. Ghost 11? Come on, look at her. Emma continued adjusting her scope, her movements steady and precise. She had faced this kind of doubt before. I mean, seriously, Davidson continued, his voice carrying across the range. We are supposed to believe that this little girl made some legendary shot. Where's the proof? Anyone can memorize some ballistics data and pretend they were there. Other cadets began to murmur among themselves. Doubt crept into their expressions. Davidson sensed the shift and pressed harder. I bet she looked up that operation online. Probably spent hours studying it just to impress people. Classic stolen valor, if you ask me. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Stolen valor claiming credit for military service or actions you never performed was one of the worst things you could accuse a soldier of. Emma's hand stilled on her rifle. Captain Webb, who had been observing from the instructor's platform, stepped forward. That's a serious allegation, Cadet Davidson. It's a serious situation, sir, Davidson replied with fake sincerity. We can't have people lying about their service record. It undermines everything we stand for. Emma finally looked up from her scope. Her voice was quiet but carried clearly across the now silent range. You want proof? Yeah, I want proof. Davidson shot back. Real proof. Not just memorized numbers and some story about a shoelace. Emma stood up, her small frame somehow commanding attention from every person on the firing line. She walked over to Davidson's shooting position and examined his target through binoculars. Your last 5 shots, she said conversationally. 3 inches left, 2 inches left, 4 inches left, 1 inch left, 3 inches left. Consistent pattern. Want to know why? Davidson's jaw tightened. Equipment malfunction. No. Emma handed him back the binoculars. You anticipate recoil. Your body tenses up about half a second before you pull the trigger. Your left shoulder drops slightly, which throws off your sight alignment. It's a common problem, easily fixed with proper breathing techniques. She paused, looking directly at him. But you would rather blame your equipment than admit you need help. The range was completely silent now. Even the instructors had stopped their conversations to listen. "You know what your real problem is, Davidson?" Emma continued, her voice still calm but carrying an edge that had not been there before. "You think being a sniper is about being the biggest, strongest, most intimidating person in the room. You think it's about proving how tough you are." She gestured toward the targets downrange. "But those targets don't care about your size. They don't care about your ego. They only care about precision. And precision comes from discipline, patience, and the ability to control yourself under pressure. Things you clearly struggle with." Davidson's face was red now, his hands clenched into fists. "You don't know anything about me. I know you failed the psychological evaluation twice before they let you into this program," Emma said quietly. "I know you have anger management issues that show up in your shooting. And I know that right now, you are so angry that if you tried to take a shot, you would miss by 6 inches. Captain Webb checked Davidson's file on his tablet. His eyebrows rose slightly, confirming Emma's claims. "How could you possibly know that?" Davidson demanded. Emma smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because I read people the same way I read wind conditions. And right now, you are broadcasting your instability to everyone on this range." The confrontation had reached a breaking point. Davidson stepped closer to Emma, using his size to intimidate her. "You think you're so smart? You think you're better than everyone else? Prove it." "I don't have to prove anything to you." "Yeah, you do. Because until you do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows you're a fake." Emma looked around the range. Every cadet, every instructor was watching. She could see the doubt in their eyes, the questions forming. Davidson had successfully planted seeds of suspicion that would grow if left unchallenged. For 3 weeks, she had tried to blend in, to train quietly, to help others without drawing attention to herself. She had hoped to pass through this academy like a ghost teaching when she could, learning what she needed to, and moving on without leaving traces. But Davidson was not going to let that happen. He was going to force her into the light, whether she wanted it or not. Emma fingered the engraved bullet in her pocket, the physical reminder of a day when staying hidden was not an option, when 12 lives depended on her willingness to act. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. That evening, Emma made a decision that would change everything. Instead of retreating to her bunk as usual, she remained on the range after official training hours. She set up at the longest distance marker 800 meters and began a shooting demonstration that would become legend at Westgate. Academy. Word spread quickly through the dormitory. By the time the sun was setting, nearly half the academy had gathered to watch. Emma had positioned herself at the most challenging station, using iron sights instead of a scope, shooting at targets the most cadets struggled to hit even with advanced optics. Captain Webb arrived with several other instructors, drawn by reports of what was happening. They found Emma in perfect shooting position, completely motionless except for the controlled rhythm of her breathing. The first shot rang out across the range. Perfect center mass. The second shot followed within seconds. Dead center again. By the fifth shot, the gathering crowd had fallen completely silent. Emma was not just hitting the target she was placing. Each bullet within a circle smaller than a quarter, at a distance where most marksmen would be happy just to hit the target board. Davidson pushed his way to the front of the crowd, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Lucky shots," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Emma stood up and began walking toward the target. The crowd followed at a distance. When they reached the 800-meter marker, even the instructors were amazed. 5 shots, all, within a 2-inch circle, perfectly centered. "This proves nothing," Davidson said, but he was grasping now. Anyone can hit a stationary target in perfect conditions. Emma looked at him with something approaching pity. "You're right. Perfect. Conditions are easy." She glanced up at the wind flags, which were beginning to flutter as evening breezes picked up. "Would you like me to make it more challenging?" Before Davidson could respond, Emma had walked back to the firing line. This time, she set up at the 1,000-meter marker, a distance reserved for advanced students nearing graduation. The wind was gusting now, making the flags dance unpredictably. "Fire shots," she called out clearly enough for everyone to hear. "I'll call each one before I take it." The crowd exchanged glances. Calling shots predicting exactly where your bullet would hit before pulling the trigger was something only master-level shooters attempted, and only under ideal conditions. Emma settled into position and began her first calculation. She watched the grass moving in the distance, observed the way dust was swirling near the target, and felt the direction of the breeze on her face. First shot, center mass, adjusted for 8-mile-per-hour crosswind from the northwest. The rifle cracked. Through binoculars, spotters confirmed the hit exactly where she had predicted. Second shot, 2 inches right of center, compensating for pressure drop and thermal shift. Another perfect prediction, another perfect shot. By the third shot, even Davidson had stopped protesting. Emma was not just shooting. She was demonstrating a level of skill that bordered on supernatural. "Captain," Webb approached her position during a pause between shots. "Emma," he said quietly, using her first name for the first time. "Where did you really learn to shoot like this?" Emma looked up at him, and for a moment, the carefully constructed walls she had built around her past wavered. "My father taught me," she said simply. "Master Sergeant Robert Torres. He said that shooting was not about the rifle or the scope or the conditions. It was about understanding yourself and understanding the world around you. Your father was military, Kraken unit, elite reconnaissance." Emma's voice carried a weight of loss. "He was supposed to provide overwatch during Operation Silent Echo, but he got injured during training. Someone had to take his place." Webb's eyes widened as pieces of a classified puzzle began fitting together in his mind. "How old were you?" 20. Emma returned to her shooting position. Old enough to know better, too young to care. The fourth and fifth shots were flawless, completing a demonstration that would be talked about for years among academy instructors. As Emma packed her equipment, the crowd began to disperse, but the conversations continued in hushed, respectful tones. Davidson lingered, clearly struggling with what he had witnessed. Finally, he approached her. I owe you an apology." Emma looked at him for a long moment. "No, you don't. You were protecting your unit. That's what good soldiers do." She paused. "But now you know who I am. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?" Davidson considered this. "I'm going to ask you to teach me how to control my breathing." Emma smiled, the first genuine smile anyone at the academy had seen from her. "Report to the range tomorrow at 0500. We'll start with the basics." Word of Emma's shooting demonstration reached the academy's senior staff within hours. Colonel Hayes found himself in an unprecedented situation. A cadet whose abilities far exceeded those of his instructors, whose background was so classified that even his security clearance was insufficient to access her complete file. The next morning, Hayes called Emma to his office. She arrived precisely on time, as always, her uniform immaculate and her bearing respectful, but not subservient. "Sit down, Torres." Hayes gestured to a chair across from his desk. "We need to talk." Emma remained standing. "If this is about the demonstration last night, sir, I was using the range during authorized hours with proper safety protocols. It's not about the demonstration. Well, not directly." Hayes activated his computer and pulled up a file that was mostly redacted black lines. "I've been trying to access your complete service record. Do you know what I found?" "I assume you found very little, sir." "I found nothing. Not just little nothing. According to official records, Emma Torres has never served in the United States military. You don't exist. Emma's expression remained neutral. Yet here I am, sir. Yes, here you are. In my academy, training alongside cadets who think you're just another recruit. Hayes leaned forward. But you're not, are you? You're something else entirely. Before Emma could respond, there was a knock on the door. Captain Webb entered, carrying a thick file folder. Colonel, I've been doing some research on Operation Silent Echo. I think you need to see this. Webb opened the folder and spread several documents across Hayes's desk. After-action reports, casualty lists, commendation recommendations, all related to the desert operation that had made Ghost 11 legendary. The official record shows 12 soldiers from Kraken Unit were pinned down in an ambush, Webb explained. They were extracted with 0 casualties, thanks to precision sniper support from an unknown operative designated Ghost 11. Hayes studied the documents. Unknown operative? That's where it gets interesting. Webb pointed to a specific paragraph. The unit's primary sniper, Staff Sergeant Morrison, was wounded early in the engagement. He couldn't have made these shots. The unit's secondary marksman was a radio operator, me. I was busy coordinating extraction. So who took the shots? Webb looked directly at Emma. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Someone whose presence during a classified operation would have violated numerous regulations. Someone who had to be erased from the record to protect everyone involved. Colonel Hayes's understanding dawned slowly. You're telling me that Ghost 11 was a civilian? Not just any civilian, Webb continued. The daughter of Master Sergeant Robert Torres, Kraken Unit's primary sniper. She was 20 years old, had no official military status, and saved 12 lives with 3 impossible shots. Hayes turned to Emma. Is this true? Emma finally sat down, her composure cracking slightly for the first time since entering the office. My father was injured 3 days before the mission. The unit couldn't wait for a replacement. Intelligence indicated the enemy convoy would only be vulnerable for a narrow window. So they took you instead. They took me as a field observer. Only, I wasn't supposed to engage unless there was a real emergency. And Emma's voice grew quieter. It became a real emergency very quickly. Hayes sat back in his chair, trying to process the implications. You saved 12 soldiers during an unauthorized combat action, were erased from all official records to avoid a bureaucratic nightmare. And now you're here training as a basic cadet. Yes, sir. Why? Emma looked out the window toward the training ranges, where other cadets were struggling with fundamentals she had mastered years ago. Because there are others like me out there. Young people with natural ability who never get proper training. Soldiers who might face impossible situations without the knowledge they need to survive. So you came back to teach. I came back to make sure nobody else gets erased. Colonel Hayes was quiet for a long moment, studying Emma's file, or rather, studying the absence of information where her file should have been. Finally, he made a decision that would change the Academy forever. Captain Webb, I want you to contact the Pentagon. Tell them we have a situation that requires immediate clarification at the highest levels. Sir, we have a ghost in our academy, and I intend to make her officially visible. The video conference with Pentagon officials took place 3 days later in Colonel Hayes's secure communication room. Emma sat at the conference table, flanked by Hayes and Webb, facing a screen filled with military officials whose ranks and departments she could only guess at. General Patricia Morrison, no relation to the wounded sniper from Operation Silent Echo, led the discussion. Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Miss Torres, she began, we have a problem. According to our records, you were never present during Operation Silent Echo. You have no military status, no security clearance, and no authorization to have participated in classified operations. Emma remained silent, having learned long ago that sometimes the best response was no response at all. However, the general continued, we also have testimony from 12 soldiers whose lives were saved by someone designated Ghost 11. We have ballistics evidence that matches your demonstration at Westgate Academy. And we have Captain Webb's eyewitness account of your presence during the operation. Another official, whose nameplate read, Director of Military Intelligence, leaned forward. The question becomes, how do we handle someone who officially doesn't exist, but unofficially saved American lives during a classified mission? Colonel Hayes spoke up. With respect, sir, I believe the question is simpler than that. We have an exceptional individual who's been denied recognition for heroic actions because of bureaucratic complications. The solution is to correct the bureaucracy, not punish the hero. It's not that simple, Colonel, Director Morrison replied. Miss Torres's presence during that operation violated numerous regulations. If we officially recognize her actions, we create legal precedents that could complicate future operations. Emma finally spoke, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable conviction. Gentlemen, with all due respect, 12 soldiers are alive today because someone was willing to break regulations. If that creates uncomfortable precedents, perhaps the regulations need to be examined. The screen went quiet. Military bureaucracy was not accustomed to being challenged by unauthorized personnel, especially 26-year-old women who technically didn't exist in their system. General Morrison's expression softened slightly. Miss Torres, what do you want from us? Emma looked directly into the camera. I want nothing for myself. I want official recognition that Operation Silent Echo was successful because of contributions made by personnel who aren't in your files. I want those 12 soldiers to know that their lives were saved by someone who cared more about their safety than about following proper channels. She paused, then continued with growing intensity. And I want assurance that future operations won't fail because qualified personnel are excluded based on paperwork rather than ability. Another official, previously silent, spoke up. Are you suggesting we should regularly allow unauthorized civilians to participate in classified military operations? I'm suggesting that exceptional circumstances require exceptional responses. My father was injured. The mission couldn't be delayed. Someone had to take his place. The choice was between sending 12 soldiers into an ambush without proper sniper support or allowing someone with the necessary skills to fill the gap. Emma leaned forward. You made the right choice then. Honor it now. The conversation continued for another hour, with officials debating legal implications, preceding concerns, and bureaucratic complications. Emma listened patiently, but her expression grew increasingly determined. Finally, General Morrison called for a recess. The screen went dark, leaving Emma alone with Colonel Hayes and Captain Webb. How do you think it went? Hayes asked. Emma smiled grimly. They're going to offer me a compromise. Official recognition in exchange for signing non-disclosure agreements that prevent me from ever talking about it publicly. And will you accept that? No. Emma's answer was immediate and firm. The whole point is that there are others like me. Young people with ability who need training. Soldiers who might face impossible situations. If I sign agreements that keep me quiet, I can't help them. 20 minutes later, the screen reactivated. General Morrison's expression was unreadable. Miss Torres, we are prepared to offer you full recognition of your actions during Operation Silent Echo. You will receive appropriate commendations, and your service will be officially acknowledged. Emma waited for the conditions she knew were coming. In exchange, you will sign agreements limiting your ability to discuss the classified aspects of the operation, and you will accept a commission as an instructor at Westgate Academy with appropriate security clearances. Emma considered the offer. It was more than she had expected, but still fell short of what was needed. "I accept the commission and the security clearances," she said. "But I won't sign agreements that prevent me from teaching others about survival techniques that could save lives. The specific operational details can remain classified, but the lessons learned need to be shared." The officials exchanged glances. Through their secure network, this was not going according to their usual script. Director Morrison spoke up. "Miss Torres, you're not in a position to negotiate terms with the United States military." Emma's response was quiet but unmistakable. "Respectfully, sir, 12 soldiers would disagree with that assessment." 6 months later, Instructor Torres stood before a new class of sniper candidates at Westgate Academy. Her official rank was lieutenant, her security clearance was higher than most colonels, and her reputation had spread throughout the special operations community. But to the cadets sitting in front of her, she was simply the instructor who had revolutionized how the academy approached marksmanship training. "Today we're going to talk about improvised equipment," she announced, holding up a piece of red paracord. "Sometimes your fancy wind meters break. Sometimes your advanced optics fail. Sometimes all you have is a piece of string and the knowledge your father gave you." The class listened with the respectful attention that exceptional teachers command. These weren't the same kind of cadets Emma had trained with months earlier. Word of her story, carefully edited to remove classified details, had attracted a different caliber of recruit. People who understood that true expertise came from experience, not just equipment. Bradley Davidson sat in the front row, his notebook filled with careful notes. The transformation in the man had been remarkable. Once Emma had helped him overcome his breathing issues and emotional control problems, his shooting scores had improved dramatically. More importantly, his attitude toward learning had completely changed. "Instructor Torres," he raised his hand. "Can you tell us about the psychology of taking impossible shots?" Emma smiled. Davidson had become one of her most dedicated students, and his questions always pushed the class to think deeper. "The psychology is simple," she replied. "You don't think about the impossibility. You think about the necessity. When 12 lives depend on your next shot, you don't have the luxury of doubt." She walked over to the whiteboard and began drawing. "Wind patterns. Fear gives you information. Use it instead of fighting it. Pressure clarifies what matters. Let it focus your attention rather than scatter it." After class, Emma walked across the academy grounds toward the Western Range, where a small memorial had been erected. Not an official military memorial. Those were reserved for officially recognized heroes. This was something the cadets had built themselves, a simple marker at the 2,700-meter line with an inscription that had become the Academy's unofficial motto: "A bullet doesn't aim at a target. A bullet aims at the last chance for survival." Captain Webb found her there, as he often did during her evening walks. "How are the new recruits?" he asked. "Promising. Different from the ones who were here when I arrived. These actually want to learn instead of just proving how tough they are." Webb nodded. "Word gets around. People know what kind of instruction they'll get here now." Emma fingered the red cord around her wrist, the same cord she had used to measure wind during operation. Silent echo, now her constant reminder of what improvisation and determination could accomplish. "Any regrets?" Webb asked. "About going public, I mean." "About forcing the Pentagon to acknowledge what happened." Emma considered the question. The past months had not been easy. Congressional hearings about military oversight, policy reviews about civilian involvement in classified operations, bureaucratic complications. That would probably take years to fully resolve. But she also thought about the letters she received from soldiers around the world. Testimonies from people who had applied her unconventional techniques in combat situations. Stories about lives saved using improvised methods when advanced equipment failed. No regrets, she said finally. Some things are more important than staying invisible. As they walked back toward the academy buildings, Emma noticed a group of cadets gathered around the memorial marker, leaving small tokens of respect. A piece of string representing improvised wind measurement, a worn bullet casing, photographs of family members they were trained to protect. Nobody had organized these tributes. They happened naturally, the way important things do. Emma Torres had spent years as a ghost, moving through military history without leaving official traces. Now she was building something different, a legacy based not on hidden achievements, but on knowledge shared, skills passed down, and the understanding that the most important victories often happen in complete silence. The mouse in the corner had found her voice, and she intended to use it to make sure that no other ghost would have to fight alone. 2 years after the Pentagon hearings, Lieutenant Torres received an unexpected visitor at Westgate Academy. A young Marine named Rachel Martinez knocked on her office door during evening hours, carrying a folder of papers and wearing the determined expression of someone who had traveled a long way for important reasons. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you about my brother." Emma invited her in, offering coffee and a comfortable chair. Over the past months, she had received many such visits, family members of soldiers whose lives had been touched by the techniques she taught, people seeking guidance for loved ones facing deployment, relatives looking for closure after difficult losses. "My brother Miguel was killed in action 3 months ago," Rachel began, her voice steady despite the obvious pain. "He was a sniper with the 3rd Marine Division, deployed to Eastern Europe." Emma listened quietly, recognizing the careful composure of someone who had rehearsed this conversation many times. "The thing is," Rachel continued, "the official report says he died because his equipment malfunctioned during a critical engagement. But I found something in his personal effects that doesn't match that story." She opened her folder and pulled out a piece of notebook paper covered with handwritten calculations. Wind angles, gravitational compensations, thermal adjustments, all written in the margins around what appeared to be a love letter. Emma examined the paper, her expression growing more interested as she read. "These calculations are advanced, very advanced. Where did your brother learn techniques like this?" "That's what I came to ask you, because at the bottom of the page, he wrote something that led me here." Rachel pointed to a line of text in different handwriting. "E. Torres methods. Use string when electronics fail. Remember the ghost never quits." Emma's breath caught. She had never met Miguel Martinez, had never heard his name before today. But somehow, her teaching had reached him across thousands of miles and multiple degrees of separation. "Ma'am, I think my brother died trying to use improvised techniques. He learned from someone who learned from someone who learned from you. And I think his equipment didn't malfunction. I think he saved his unit using methods that aren't in any official manual." Emma studied the calculations more carefully. They were crude, but fundamentally sound, the work of someone who understood the principles she taught, but had been forced to apply them under extreme pressure. "What do you want from me, Rachel?" "I want to know if my brother died as a hero or as a victim of equipment failure. I want to understand why the military would rather blame machines than credit unconventional methods that actually work." Emma set down the paper and looked directly at Rachel. "Your brother died saving lives. These calculations prove he made at least 3 successful shots using improvised wind measurement and manual compensation techniques. Equipment failure was the cover story, because acknowledging his methods would require admitting that standard protocols were insufficient." Rachel's composure finally cracked. Tears ran down her cheeks as she whispered, "I knew it. I knew Miguel was too good a Marine to die because of a broken scope." Emma reached across her desk and pulled out a red piece of paracord identical to the one around her wrist. This is for you. It represents every soldier who has ever had to improvise when everything went wrong, who chose to act instead of following procedures, who saved lives in ways that will never appear in official reports. I can't take that. Yes, you can, because you're going to carry on his legacy. Emma leaned forward with the intensity that made her such an effective instructor. Your brother learned these techniques secondhand, maybe third-hand, from someone. Who learned them from one of my students? The information degraded with each transfer. People died because the knowledge wasn't complete. She stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the ranges where new cadets were training under floodlights. Rachel, how's your education? Your background? College graduate, engineering degree. I was considering military service before Miguel's deployment. Emma turned back to her. I'm starting a new program. Civilian instructors who can teach survival. Techniques to military units without getting tangled up in bureaucratic restrictions. People who can travel to forward bases and share knowledge that saves lives. You want me to become an instructor? I want you to become the instructor your brother needed but never had access to. I want you to make sure that the next Marine in an impossible situation has complete information, not fragments passed down through unofficial channels. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, processing the offer and its implications. What would I be teaching? Everything your brother figured out on his own, plus everything he didn't have time to learn. Wind reading without instruments. Distance calculation using landmarks. Breathing techniques that work under combat stress. Most importantly, decision-making when all your training says something is impossible, but lives depend on you trying anyway. Emma returned to her desk and pulled out a thick folder. These are letters from soldiers around the world who have used unconventional techniques in combat situations. Stories about lives saved when advanced equipment failed. Testimonies from people who improvised solutions because they remembered something they heard from someone who heard it from one of my students. She handed the folder to Rachel. This is the network your brother was part of, people who understand that survival often depends on knowledge that isn't in any official manual. We call ourselves the Ghost Network. Rachel opened the folder and began reading. Letter after letter from soldiers, Marines, and Special Forces personnel describing situations where improvised techniques had made the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. How many people are involved in this? Hundreds now. Maybe thousands. It's hard to count because most of them don't know they're part of anything official. They just share knowledge that works. Emma pulled out a map marked with pins in dozens of locations around the world. These are places where Ghost Network techniques have been applied in real combat situations. Each pin represents lives saved using methods that most military institutions don't recognize. And you want to make this official? I want to make it better. Right now, information travels randomly. A soldier learns something useful and maybe passes it to friends in his unit. Maybe one of them remembers it months later when they need it. Maybe they don't. Emma pointed to specific pins on the map. But imagine if we had trained instructors at every major base. People who could teach complete techniques instead of fragments. Civilians who could share knowledge without worrying about military politics or bureaucratic restrictions. Rachel studied the map, the letters, the calculations her brother had made in his final moments. Slowly, the full scope of what Emma was proposing became clear. You're building a parallel training system. I'm building a survival system. Official training teaches you to operate advanced equipment under ideal conditions. Ghost Network training teaches you to stay alive when everything goes wrong. Emma sat back down across from Rachel. Your brother figured out part of this system on his own, under extreme pressure, with incomplete information. He saved lives. But imagine what he could have accomplished with proper training. And you think I can provide that training? I think You can honor his sacrifice by making sure no other soldier has to improvise life-saving techniques while being shot at. Rachel was quiet for several minutes, reading through more letters and studying the map. Finally, she looked up at Emma with the same determined expression she had worn when she first entered the office. "What do I need to do?" Emma smiled, the warm, genuine smile that her students had learned to associate with breakthrough moments. "First, you learn everything I can teach you. Then you learn everything my instructors can teach you. Then you go places where soldiers need help, and you teach them how to survive when survival seems impossible." She pulled out a training schedule and handed it to Rachel. "The program starts Monday. Physical conditioning, advanced marksmanship, improvised equipment techniques, and most importantly, how to teach others under pressure." Rachel scanned the schedule. It was intensive months of training that would push her to limits she had never imagined. "One more thing," Emma added. "You keep that piece of paracord your brother would have carried. When you teach someone else these techniques, you give them a piece of cord just like it. The network grows one person at a time, one life at a time." That evening, Emma stood once again at the memorial marker on the Western Range. But this time, she wasn't alone. Rachel stood beside her, along with Bradley Davidson, who had completed his instructor certification 6 months earlier, and Captain Webb, who now served as Emma's second-in-command for the civilian training program. "How many?" Webb asked, looking at the newest collection of tokens left by cadets at the memorial. 43 active instructors," Emma replied, "operating on 6 continents. Conservative estimate is that ghost network techniques have saved over 200 lives in the past 18 months. Davidson picked up one of the tokens, a bullet casing engraved with coordinates. "This is from Afghanistan. Someone learned distance calculation techniques from our program." Emma nodded. "The network is growing faster than we can track." "That's good. It means the knowledge is becoming self-sustaining." Rachel fingered the red cord Emma had given her, already beginning to understand the weight of responsibility it represented. What happens when the military decides this is a threat to their authority? She asked. Emma looked up at the stars, clear and bright in the desert sky above Westgate Academy. "Then we remind them that authority without effectiveness is just bureaucracy. And bureaucracy doesn't stop bullets." She turned to face the small group. "The ghost never quits, because quitting means good people die for preventable reasons. Miguel Martinez figured that out in his final moments. Our job is to make sure other soldiers don't have to figure it out under fire." As they walked back toward the academy buildings, Emma felt the same sense of purpose that had driven her through Operation Silent Echo years earlier. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had an army of invisible instructors spreading knowledge that would echo through military units for generations. The mouse in the corner had become the voice that whispered survival secrets to soldiers around the world. And that whisper was growing into something that could no longer be ignored or suppressed. Emma Torres had learned that the most powerful ghosts are the ones who refuse to stay dead. They live on in the knowledge they pass down, in the lives they save, and in the quiet heroes they inspire to carry on their mission. The engraved bullet in her pocket still read "Final win confirmed." But now she understood that some victories are just the beginning of larger battles. And this battle, the fight to keep good soldiers alive through knowledge that institutions refuse to acknowledge, was one worth spending a lifetime fighting. In the darkness of Westgate Academy, new cadets were already learning techniques that would one day save lives in ways they could never imagine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, and new opportunities to turn invisible knowledge into visible results. The ghost had found her purpose, and her purpose would outlive any bureaucracy that tried to contain it. If you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our everyday life stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.